Hello and welcome back to Real Life of Animals. Tonight we are entering one of the most dangerous places on Earth, the forests of India, where humans and tigers are forced to share the same land. What you're about to hear are real incidents, drawn from documented attacks, local reports, and survivor testimonies. The names have been changed to protect families, but the events themselves happened exactly as described. These are not legends. These are not exaggerations. These are moments where ordinary people came face to face with one of nature's most efficient predators, and some never came back. Stay with us until the end, and if real animal encounters fascinate and terrify you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notification, because these stories happen more often than anyone wants to admit. Story 1. India. Real tiger incident. The village of Moharli sat at the very edge of the Tadoba Undari Tiger Reserve, where the forest did not begin suddenly but slowly swallowed human life one tree at a time. Here, the boundary between civilization and wilderness was nothing more than a broken fence and a line of warning signs most villagers had stopped reading years ago. For generations, people in Moharli lived knowing the jungle was never truly quiet. Every rustle carried meaning. Every sudden silence carried fear. Tigers were not rare here. They were neighbors. Dangerous, invisible neighbors. Anil Deshmukh was 42 years old when the forest took him. He had worked as a daily laborer since his teenage years, cutting bamboo, clearing undergrowth, and guiding tourists along designated forest paths during peak seasons. He understood the jungle better than most outsiders ever could. He knew which birds signaled danger, which trails to avoid after dusk, and which months the tigers became more aggressive due to mating or injury. That morning, Anil left his home just after sunrise to collect firewood with two other men from the village. The monsoon rains had been heavy that week, and fallen branches littered the forest floor. Firewood was scarce near the village, forcing them deeper into tiger territory. By mid-morning, the humidity was suffocating. Sweat soaked through Anil's shirt as the men worked silently, breaking branches and tying bundles together. The forest felt wrong that day. No monkey calls, no distant bird cries, only the sound of insects and their own breathing. Anil noticed the pug marks first. They were massive, pressed deep into the soft mud, unmistakably fresh. A large male tiger had passed through recently, probably during the night or early dawn. The direction of the tracks cut directly across the path they were standing on. One of the men suggested turning back. Another argued they were already too far in. Anil hesitated. He had seen tracks like this before, but something about these marks unsettled him. They were not wandering prints. They were deliberate, aligned, purposeful. Minutes later, the forest answered their mistake. The tiger emerged from the undergrowth without warning. No growl, no roar, just a sudden explosion of orange and black muscle. It launched itself forward with terrifying precision, closing the distance in seconds. The men scattered instinctively. Anil ran toward a cluster of trees, his heart hammering so hard it drowned out every other sound. He tripped over an exposed root and fell face first into the mud. Before he could rise, a crushing weight slammed into his back. The tiger's jaws clamped onto his shoulder. Witnesses later described hearing a single scream, abruptly cut short. The tiger dragged Anil several meters into the dense brush, disappearing completely. The forest swallowed both predator and prey as if nothing had happened. The two surviving men ran for nearly an hour before reaching the village, hysterical and covered in scratches. Forest officials were alerted immediately, but by the time a search team entered the area, the trail was already cold. Anil's body was found 2 days later, partially concealed beneath leaves and branches. The tiger had fed and returned multiple times, a behavior common in confirmed man-eaters. There were clear signs of defensive wounds, broken branches, and deep claw marks on nearby trees. The incident shook the entire region. Within weeks, officials confirmed the tiger involved was an older male with a fractured canine tooth, likely injured during a territorial fight. Unable to hunt its natural prey efficiently, it had turned to humans. This was not an act of aggression fueled by curiosity. It was survival. The tiger was eventually tracked using camera traps and tranquilized after several failed attempts. It was relocated to a protected enclosure, though locals debated whether relocation truly prevented future deaths. For the villagers, the damage was already done. Children stopped walking to school alone. Farmers abandoned fields closest to the forest. Every sound after dusk triggered panic. Anil's family received compensation, but no amount of money replaced a husband, a father, a man who simply went into the forest to survive. This was not an isolated case. Across central and eastern India, similar incidents occur every year. As forests shrink and human populations expand, encounters with apex predators increase. Tigers do not hunt out of malice. They hunt because nature allows no mercy for weakness, injury, or hunger. The jungle does not hate humans. It does not warn them twice. It simply takes what it needs. And in places like Moharli, the line between daily life and sudden death remains razor thin, drawn not by humans but by the silent footsteps of a tiger moving through the trees. Story 2. India. Real tiger incident. The village of Karangia lay tucked against the sal forests of Odisha, far from highways, cities, or tourist maps. Life there moved slowly, dictated by seasons, rainfall, and the invisible rules of the jungle. For the people of Karangia, the forest was not a place of adventure. It was a necessity. It provided food, firewood, and income. It also demanded payment. For years, rumors had circulated about a tiger roaming beyond the protected reserve boundaries. Forest officials dismissed most of them as exaggerated sightings or misidentified leopards. Tigers, they insisted, stayed deep within designated zones. The villagers knew better. Suresh Nayak was one of the first to accept that truth the hard way. At 35, Suresh worked as a forest produce collector. Every morning before dawn, he and a small group of villagers entered the forest to gather sal leaves, honey, and fallen timber. He had done this work since childhood. He knew which areas to avoid and which trails were safest. Or at least, he believed he did. The incident occurred during the dry season when water sources inside the forest became scarce. Animals were forced closer to human settlements, and human activity pushed deeper inward. That overlap was where danger lived. Suresh separated from the group around mid-morning, following a familiar trail toward a shallow ravine where he often found fallen branches. The forest was unusually still. Even the cicadas were quiet. The air felt heavy, charged, as if something unseen had shifted. He never heard the tiger approach. Survivors often say the most terrifying thing about tiger attacks is the silence. No warning, no sound of movement. One moment the forest is ordinary, the next, it ends. The tiger struck from behind. The impact sent Suresh sprawling forward, his face scraping against the dirt. The animal's weight crushed his spine as claws tore through his back. He screamed instinctively, the sound echoing briefly before being swallowed by trees. The tiger dragged him toward the ravine. Branches snapped, leaves scattered. Suresh clawed at the ground, his fingers digging into soil and roots. In a desperate act, he grabbed a thick stick and swung blindly. It struck the tiger's flank, triggering a violent roar that shook the forest. That roar alerted nearby villagers. They rushed toward the sound, shouting and beating metal tools together. The noise startled the tiger just enough to loosen its grip. It released Suresh and vanished into the undergrowth, melting back into the forest as if it had never been there. Suresh was barely alive. His back was shredded, ribs fractured, and blood loss severe. Villagers carried him for hours to reach the nearest road. By the time he arrived at the hospital, doctors were unsure if he would survive the night. He did. But survival came with consequences. Suresh lost mobility in one leg and suffered permanent nerve damage. He would never return to the forest. The work that had sustained his family for decades was gone in a single violent moment. In the weeks that followed, panic spread through Karangia. Sightings increased. Livestock vanished. Fresh pug marks appeared near wells and crop fields. Forest officials finally confirmed what villagers had feared. A subadult tiger had moved out of its territory, likely displaced by dominant males deeper in the reserve. Attempts to track it failed repeatedly. Dense foliage and limited resources slowed response efforts. The tiger was never captured, it simply disappeared. Some believed it moved on, others believed it learned. Experts later explained that tigers injured during territorial conflicts often target humans not out of aggression but opportunity. Humans are slower, easier, and lack the defensive instincts of wild prey. Once a tiger succeeds in such an encounter, the behavior can repeat. For Suresh, the forest became something else entirely. He reported recurring nightmares, the feeling of weight on his back, the soundless rush before impact, the realization that death had arrived without warning. Even years later, he avoided tree lines and refused to be alone outdoors. His story became a warning whispered among villages across the region. Not a legend, not a rumor. A documented incident recorded by local authorities and medical records. In India's rural forests, danger does not announce itself. It waits patiently, hidden in plain sight, until one moment changes everything. And for those who survive, the jungle never truly lets them go. Story 3. India. Real tiger incident. The village of Damtari rested along the fringes of Chhattisgarh's dense teak forests, an area long known for conflict between humans and wildlife. Here, the forest did not begin at a fence or a gate. It began at the edge of people's backyards. Children played within sight of tall grass, and livestock grazed only meters from tiger territory. For decades, villagers spoke of tigers crossing paths meant only for humans. Most encounters ended without blood. This one did not. Meena Patel was 29 years old and newly married when she disappeared. On the morning she vanished, Meena left her home carrying a metal water pot. The village well had dried up weeks earlier, forcing residents to collect water from a forest stream less than a kilometer away. It was a routine task performed mostly by women, often in small groups. That day, Meena went alone. The path to the stream cut through a narrow corridor of thick vegetation, where visibility dropped to only a few meters. Locals avoided it after sunset, but daylight had always felt safe. That assumption would prove fatal. When Mina failed to return after 2 hours, concern turned to alarm. Her family searched the path, calling her name. They found the water pot first, dented and lying on its side. Nearby, the ground was torn apart, leaves scattered violently, earth clawed deep. There were drag marks leading into the forest. Search parties were organized immediately, joined by forest guards. The trail was easy to follow at first. Broken branches, blood drops, torn fabric caught on thorns. The signs told a story no one wanted to accept. Nearly 3 kilometers inside the forest, they found her remains. Forest officials later confirmed the cause of death as a tiger attack. Bite marks to the neck, deep claw wounds across the torso. Evidence indicated the tiger had ambushed from cover, dragging Mina away before she could react. The tiger did not consume the body entirely, suggesting the attack was sudden and opportunistic rather than prolonged predation. The impact on the village was immediate and severe. Women refused to walk the path to the stream. Children were kept indoors. Farmers abandoned fields closest to the forest. Fear spread faster than any official explanation. Forest authorities installed camera traps and began tracking the animal. Footage revealed a large female tiger with cubs. Experts believe the attack was driven by heightened territorial aggression, a known behavior among mothers protecting young. Relocating a mother tiger is nearly impossible without endangering the cubs. Killing it would disrupt the ecosystem further. Officials faced a dilemma with no clean solution. Instead, they reinforced patrols and restricted human movement near forest corridors. For the villagers, this felt like an afterthought. Mina's family received compensation, but it came weeks later. By then, the damage had already been done. Her husband left the village. Her parents sealed their home and moved in with relatives miles away. This incident was recorded, investigated, and quietly archived among dozens of similar cases across India. Between 2018 and 2022, official reports documented hundreds of fatal tiger encounters, many occurring far outside protected reserves. Most involved routine daily tasks, collecting water, grazing cattle, walking to school. These were not reckless adventurers. They were ordinary people doing what they had always done. In Damtari, the path to the stream remains overgrown. No one uses it anymore. Nature has reclaimed it completely, as if erasing evidence of human presence. But the memory lingers. The forest does not distinguish between intention and opportunity. It does not understand routine or familiarity. It responds only to instinct. And in places like Damtari, one step into the trees can mean crossing into a world where survival is never guaranteed. Story 4. India Kartama Chizurtil Real Tiger Incident. The Sundarbans Delta is one of the most dangerous landscapes on Earth. A labyrinth of mangrove forests, shifting mudbanks, and tidal rivers, it is home to one of the largest populations of man-eating tigers in the world. Here, the boundary between land and water constantly moves, and humans and predators are forced into uneasy coexistence. In this region, tiger attacks are not rare anomalies. They are a known risk of daily life. Rahul Das understood this better than most. At 43, Rahul was an experienced honey collector, part of a profession passed down through generations. Each year during the honey season, men from surrounding villages entered the forest to harvest wild honey from towering mangrove trees. The work was dangerous, but it paid more than fishing or farming. Rahul had survived the forest for nearly 2 decades. On the morning of his final trip, he joined a group of 5 men. They followed established routes by boat, tying red cloths around their heads and faces. Locals believed the color deterred tigers, mimicking the face of a forest spirit. Science never supported the claim, but tradition remained strong. The men split into pairs to cover more ground. Rahul and his cousin ventured deeper into the mangroves, moving carefully across soft mud that could swallow a man whole if he misstepped. The forest was quiet, unnaturally so. Even birds avoided the area. As Rahul climbed a tree to reach a hive, his cousin stood watch below, holding a smoking torch meant to keep animals away. The attack came without warning. Witness accounts later stated that the tiger emerged from the water itself, silent and invisible until it was too late. Sundarbans, tigers are known to swim long distances and attack from unexpected angles. Rahul's cousin heard a sound like air being forced from a lung. By the time he turned, Rahul was already being dragged down, the tiger's jaws locked around his neck. There was no struggle, no scream, just a violent pull into the mangroves. The cousin ran. Forest guards were alerted immediately, but by the time they reached the site, the tide had erased most of the evidence. Only fragments of clothing were recovered days later, found caught in mangrove roots several kilometers downstream. Rahul's body was never found. Officials classified the incident as a confirmed tiger fatality. Camera traps later identified a large male tiger frequenting the area, but no attempt was made to capture or relocate it. In the Sundarbans, removing a tiger often creates more danger by allowing other, less predictable animals to move in. Rahul's death was recorded as number 47 that year. For his family, statistics meant nothing. His wife was left with 3 children and no stable income. Compensation was promised but delayed. The forest that had fed their family for generations had taken everything in seconds. In the Sundarbans, people do not ask why tigers kill. They already know the answer. The forest is shrinking. Fish stocks are declining. Human pressure pushes deeper every year. Tigers adapt by changing their behavior, becoming bolder, more territorial, more willing to see humans as prey. Researchers have documented that Sundarbans tigers are responsible for more fatal attacks than any other tiger population in the world. They hunt in water. They ambush from behind. They attack silently. Rahul was not careless. He followed tradition, experience, and caution. But in the Sundarbans, none of that guarantees survival. The river continues to flow. The mangroves continue to grow. And every year, new names are added to a list that rarely reaches the outside world. Story 5. India. Real tiger incident. The forests of central India are very different from the mangroves of the Sundarbans. Here the land is dry, dense, and broken by narrow dirt roads that cut through protected reserves. These forests border villages that have existed long before conservation laws were written. For the people living there, the jungle is not a destination. It is part of daily life. And so are tigers. Mahesh Yadav was a night watchman for a small limestone quarry located less than 2 kilometers from the edge of a tiger reserve in Madhya Pradesh. He was 51 years old, with a limp from an old injury and a routine that rarely changed. Every night, Mahesh walked the same perimeter. The quarry had expanded steadily over the years, pushing closer to tiger territory. Workers had reported seeing pug marks near the fences, but production never stopped. The assumption was always the same. Tigers avoid noise, lights, and humans. This assumption would prove fatal. On the night of the incident, Mahesh began his patrol shortly after midnight. The power supply to the floodlights had been unstable all week, leaving long stretches of the quarry in darkness. He carried a flashlight, a wooden baton, and a mobile phone with limited signal. Security camera footage later revealed that the tiger had been inside the quarry grounds for at least 20 minutes before the attack. The animal moved calmly, circling the perimeter, avoiding open areas. It showed no signs of panic or confusion. This was not a tiger lost in human territory. This was a tiger assessing it. Mahesh never saw it coming. According to investigators, the tiger attacked from behind as Mahesh paused near a storage shed. The impact knocked him to the ground instantly. The tiger targeted the neck, killing him within seconds. There were no defensive wounds. The next morning, workers arriving for their shift noticed Mahesh's flashlight lying broken near the shed. His body was found partially covered with leaves and dust, a behavior consistent with predatory caching. Forest officials arrived within hours. The area was sealed off and camera traps were deployed. The tiger was identified as a dominant male known to patrol the western corridor of the reserve. Public pressure mounted quickly. Local residents demanded the tiger be captured or killed. Conservationists argued that the quarry itself was illegally encroaching on forest land. The government announced an inquiry, but operations resumed within a week. Mahesh's family received compensation. The tiger remained free. In the months following the attack, multiple sightings were reported near nearby villages. Livestock losses increased. Children were warned not to walk alone at dusk. Experts later concluded that the tiger had learned to associate human structures with prey. Artificial lighting and predictable patrol patterns made the quarry an easy hunting ground. This was not a sleuthy encounter. It was adaptation. India has the largest tiger population in the world, but it also has the highest number of human-tiger conflicts. As protected areas become isolated islands surrounded by development, tigers are forced to navigate a human-dominated landscape. Some survive by avoiding people. Others learn to hunt them. Mahesh's death was officially listed as an accidental wildlife conflict, but for those who knew him, it was the result of years of ignored warnings, unchecked expansion, and the dangerous illusion that humans control the jungle simply by naming it theirs. The forest did not change that night. The tiger did not change either. Only the understanding of those living nearby did. Story 6. India. Real tiger incident. The village of Keshavpur sat on the edge of a sal forest in eastern India, a place where the trees grew close together and sunlight barely reached the ground. For generations, the forest had been both a provider and a threat. Firewood, medicinal plants, grazing land, and tigers. Ramesh Cole was a daily wage laborer and part-time honey collector. During the dry season, he worked construction jobs in nearby towns. During the monsoon months, he entered the forest to harvest wild honey, a dangerous but well-paid task. He had done it for years. On the morning he died, Ramesh left his house before sunrise. His wife later told officials that he seemed uneasy, repeatedly checking the sky and the tree line before stepping onto the forest path. There had been recent tiger sightings, but honey season does not wait. Neither does hunger. Ramesh was accompanied by two other men, both experienced collectors. They walked deep into the forest, following a route they had memorized over decades. The forest was quiet, unusually so. No bird calls, no insect noise. Experienced forest workers know this silence. It means a predator is near. At around 9:30 a.m., the group reached a cluster of tall sal trees known to house multiple beehives. While the others prepared smoking torches, Ramesh moved ahead alone to scout the area. That was the last mistake he made. According to later reconstructions, the tiger had been resting nearby, concealed in thick undergrowth less than 15 meters away. When Ramesh stepped into the clearing, he crossed directly into the tiger's line of attack. Witnesses reported hearing a single scream. By the time the other men reached him, it was over. The tiger had dragged Ramesh into dense vegetation, leaving behind broken branches and deep claw marks in the soil. Blood trails indicated a powerful, uninterrupted pull. Forest officials found Ramesh's body nearly 200 meters from the initial attack site. The tiger had partially consumed him before abandoning the kill, likely disturbed by human presence. This detail disturbed investigators. Man-eating behavior is often marked by repeated feeding. This tiger had killed efficiently, eaten briefly, and withdrawn, suggesting familiarity rather than desperation. Camera traps later confirmed it was an older female tiger with worn canines and limited hunting ability for faster prey like deer. Human targets, slower and unarmed, had become a viable alternative. Villagers responded with fear and anger. Schools were closed for days. People refused to enter the forest. Protests erupted demanding the tiger's removal. Forest officials attempted to tranquilize the animal, but dense terrain and heavy rainfall made tracking nearly impossible. During this period, another attack occurred, this time on livestock just meters from a village boundary. The tiger was eventually captured weeks later and relocated to a holding facility. Officials claimed it would be rehabilitated. It never returned to the wild. Ramesh's death highlighted a growing issue across India's forest regions. Aging tigers displaced by territory loss, forced closer to human settlements where traditional livelihoods still depend on forest access. For villagers like those in Keshavpur, conservation policies often arrive too late and leave too much unsaid. They are told to coexist, but not given alternatives. The forest remains protected, the people remain exposed, and every monsoon season, men like Ramesh still walk into the trees knowing that silence may already be waiting for them. Irun Story 7, India. Real tiger incident. The village of Bhimapur lay along the outer boundary of a tiger reserve in central India, where farmland dissolved into scrub forest and then into dense jungle without warning. There were no fences, no clear borders, just an unspoken rule. Once you crossed the tree line, you accepted whatever the forest decided to take. Meena Devi understood this better than most. She was a 42-year-old mother of 3 and spent nearly every day collecting firewood and wild grasses from the forest edge. Like many women in the area, she knew the signs of danger. Overturned leaves, disturbed soil, alarm calls from monkeys. But necessity often outweighed caution. The tiger had been seen days earlier. Forest guards warned villagers to travel in groups and avoid the interior paths. But fuel was running low and Meena's husband had been injured weeks earlier in a farming accident. Without firewood, there would be no cooking, no income, no way to survive the week. On the morning of the incident, Mina left home just after sunrise with 2 other women. They carried sickles, rope, and woven baskets. Their plan was simple: gather quickly, stay close together, return before noon. The forest, however, had other plans. About an hour into their work, one of the women noticed fresh pug marks, large, clearly defined, no more than a few hours old. They hesitated. Fear spread through the group, but turning back would mean returning empty-handed. They moved deeper. According to the surviving women, the attack happened without warning. There was no growl, no rustling sound. Just sudden movement followed by force. The tiger struck from behind. Mina was pulled backward violently, her basket flying from her hands. One of the women screamed, the other froze in place, unable to process what was happening. The tiger clamped onto Mina's neck and dragged her into thick undergrowth with terrifying speed. The entire attack lasted seconds. The women ran, they did not look back. When villagers and forest guards reached the site later that morning, the signs were unmistakable. Broken branches, drag marks, and blood stains led into the forest. Mina's body was found over 300 meters from where she had been taken. She had no defensive wounds. Investigators later explained this detail quietly to her family. The tiger's bite had crushed her spine almost instantly. Death would have been immediate. This explanation brought little comfort. What followed was chaos. Villagers blocked forest access roads. Women wailed openly. Men demanded action. Children were pulled from school and kept indoors. The forest that had always loomed nearby now felt closer than ever, pressing in, watching. Forest officials attempted to track the tiger using camera traps and patrols. Evidence suggested it was a male tiger, younger than expected, healthy and fully capable of hunting wild prey. This raised an unsettling question. Why attack a human? Experts later suggested territorial confusion. Expanding farmland and shrinking corridors had forced the tiger into overlapping human zones. Mina had unknowingly entered a resting area, triggering a defensive response rather than predatory intent. But to the villagers, intent did not matter. Fear had already taken root. In the weeks following the attack, reports of tiger sightings increased. Livestock disappeared. Footprints appeared near water sources. Every rustle in the trees sent people running. Mina's children stopped sleeping through the night. Her eldest daughter later told a local journalist that she could still hear her mother's scream whenever the forest went quiet. Eventually, the tiger was tranquilized after wandering dangerously close to the village boundary again. Officials relocated it to another reserve hundreds of kilometers away. Whether it survived remains unknown. For Bhimapur, the damage was permanent. Women now travel only in large groups. Some families abandoned forest-based work entirely, plunging deeper into poverty. Others took the risk anyway, because survival leaves little room for fear. Mina's story is not unique in India's forest regions. It is repeated in different names, different villages, different years. Always the same balance between human need and animal instinct. Always the same cost. The forest does not remember her, but her village does. Every morning when the sun rises over the tree line, someone pauses before stepping forward, wondering if today will be another name added to the list. Story 8, India, Real Tiger Incident. The Sundarbans are unlike any other forest in India. There are no clear paths, no solid ground, no horizon that stays still. Land dissolves into water, water into mangrove roots, and the forest itself seems to breathe with the tides. It is one of the most dangerous tiger habitats in the world. Not because tigers are more aggressive here, but because humans and predators occupy the same fragile, shifting space. For decades, people have vanished in the Sundarbans without witnesses. Rafik Mondal was one of them. He was a 29-year-old fisherman from a small river island village, supporting his parents, his wife, and a newborn son. Like many men in the region, he worked the waterways, setting nets, checking crab traps, and navigating narrow channels where the forest pressed in from both sides. Tigers in the Sundarbans are different. They swim, they hunt from water, they understand boats. On the morning Rafik disappeared, he left before dawn with two others, navigating toward a known fishing zone they had used dozens of times before. The tide was low, visibility was poor. Mist clung to the mangroves, muting sound and distance. According to the men who survived, the forest was unusually quiet. No birds, no insects. That silence should have been a warning. Rafik stepped onto a muddy bank to secure a loose net. He was no more than 10 meters from the boat. His companions watched him crouch near the roots, focused on his work. Then the water moved. A massive shape surged upward from beneath the surface. The tiger did not leap. It rose, driven by muscle and momentum, exploding from the water with terrifying precision. It clamped onto Rafik's torso and dragged him backward into the channel before anyone could scream. The attack took less than 3 seconds. The men shouted. One grabbed an oar, another fell backward into the boat. But there was nothing to strike, nothing to chase. The water swallowed them both. They searched frantically for signs, ripples, blood, movement, but the channel was already calm again, as if nothing had happened. They waited. They called his name. Only the tide answered. Forest patrols were notified immediately. Search teams arrived within hours, but in the Sundarbans, recovery is rare. The waterways erase evidence quickly. Currents scatter remains. Mangrove roots hide what little is left. Rafik's body was never recovered. Later analysis suggested the tiger had been stalking the boat for some time, swimming silently beneath the surface. This behavior is well documented in the Sundarbans, where tigers have adapted to hunting in tidal environments. This was not an accident. This was a calculated ambush. Following the disappearance, forest officials installed additional warning signs and advised fishermen to wear protective masks on the backs of their heads, a controversial method believed to reduce tiger attacks by confusing predators that prefer ambushing from behind. Rafik's village held a funeral without a body. His wife sat beside an empty shroud. His son would grow up knowing his father only through stories and through the constant warning whispered to children in the region, "Never turn your back on the water." In the Sundarbans, tigers do not need darkness. They do not need cover. They wait beneath the surface, patient, unseen, moving with the tide. And sometimes they rise.